Hi, Dr. Will Cole. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I, I'm Amy Engkjer.
Nice to meet you, Amy.
Nice to meet you too.
We should be good.
Sounds great.
Yeti up.
Okay, great. Okay. To start, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about myself and my background and the project. I got COVID in the beginning of November 2020, and it hit me really hard. I was bedridden for 3 weeks. And then it didn't go away. And I was just buried with terrifying, strange symptoms, like over 20 symptoms. And every minute was a struggle. And it wasn't just physical pain, it was psychological pain I was dealing with too. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I began to look up information on COVID recovery, and we were just met with complete doom and gloom. And that, of course, just exacerbated all my symptoms. Despite having a background in mindfulness training and teaching meditation, it was beyond my capacity to find any calm or hope. And I thought, wow, what are people doing out there? What are people that don't have any of the tools that I have? What are they doing to cope with these strange symptoms and this whole new virus that was upon us? And if people aren't finding hopeful information and they're only met with negativity, the consequences are going to be dire for them and for the country and the world. So I vowed that once I was able, I would do whatever I could to offset the negativity by offering a resource for COVID recovery that was founded in positivity and kindness and hope and humor. And that is how Positively COVID was born.
I love that.
Thanks. But first I had to get better. And I knew that the keys to getting better were going to be first, establish and cultivate and practice mindset in positivity and kindness. I needed to rest my body. I needed to move my body in healthy ways. And then I needed to nourish my body. And to nourish my body, I turned to you. I've been a fan of yours for so long. And I went out, well, actually I didn't go out because I was still bedridden, but I ordered your book, Intuitive Fasting, and you can see it's bookmarked, it's dog-eared, it is
well loved.
It is so loved, and I am so grateful for it, and I thank you so much for it. It is so beautifully written and thoughtful and intelligent, and it really made a difference in my recovery. And it's not just a book on nutrition. I mean, you really touch on so many wonderful points of being mindful and how spending time in nature, and it was really well suited for me, and I think for a huge audience that are suffering.
Thank you so much. You made my day, man. This is amazing. So sweet of you. Thank you.
Well, you made my day. You made a lot of my days.
Thank you.
So as I said, I created Positively COVID to be a positive source for COVID recovery. And because of that, I'm going to ask all of my guests the first question, same first question. When you find yourself slipping into a funk or negativity, do you have a practice that brings you back to positivity?
Well, I put a lot of what I think like I do in my own life in intuitive fasting. Actually, these are practices that I already do and that are part of my life, not just clinically. Like obviously, my day job is consulting patients via the telehealth center, and that's what I do every day. So of course it's born out of my clinical practice, but it's so much born out of my own personal life as well. And you mentioned getting out in nature, Shinrin Yoku and the research around it that I talk about it in intuitive fasting of forest bathing. I just actually came out of a lunch, like I had patients, meetings this morning, and then had my lunch, and then me and part of the team went out in nature and walked around. And that's a great way to sort of reset and ground yourself. So that's something that it's one of those metaphysical meals that I talk about in intuitive fasting is like, it's not just about what you're eating. It's not just about the clinical nutrition stuff, but what are you serving your head and your heart? And those things impact your physiology just as much as food does. So it's a powerful, powerful tool. So that's one that's probably a daily practice for me for sure.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. So, speaking of what we feed ourselves, our souls and our bodies, we know that COVID brings with it a broad spectrum of symptoms, but we know that one of the nasty culprits across the board is inflammation. And in your book, you teach us how we have the power by changing our diet to remedy that issue. But I think a lot of people think when they think of inflammation, they think of, oh, they sprain their ankle and they can visually see swelling. But can you speak a little bit about how inflammation affects and impacts our entire body and why people dealing with long COVID, it's so important to address this issue?
Sure. So inflammation, you're right. It is a term that's used flippantly, right, in the health space and beyond. But even though it's a nebulous term, I think that it should be understood because it has a practical understanding. It's good for us all to understand it just on how is it impacting my life? Why should I care? Inflammation is this product of the immune system. It's not inherently bad. It's needed in healthy, measured, appropriate ways as a response to fight off viruses, to fight off bacteria, to heal wounds, as a proper management tool of our immune system.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is it's the Goldilocks principle, right? I mean, not too high, not too low, but just right. It's inflammation is subject to that Goldilocks principle. And that's everything else in our body too. And you look at hormones, you don't want too hormone dominance. You don't want a hormone deficiency either. Our microbiome, all the trillions of bacteria in our gut, you don't want low levels of good bacteria, but you don't want bacterial overgrowths either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same way with inflammation. You don't want too high, you don't want too low. You want it just right at the right time. And how's it responding to the invader?
Okay.
And so when someone has an infection, a viral infection or bacterial infection, proper inflammatory responses is an important thing. As we would be goners without healthy, balanced immune responses. But the problem is when there's this too high for too long, this hyperinflammatory state and chronic inflammation is really the problem. And a lot of times people that are having either the more extreme manifestations of COVID, that it's a hyperinflammatory immune, and even some would say an autoimmune response going on for some people. And then the long hauler issue is this chronic inflammatory response that isn't necessarily autoimmune, even though I could assume that as more data comes out with time, we could see it could potentially trigger autoimmune responses for some people that have a genetic predisposition for autoimmunity. But for what we know now, we know that it's this chronic inflammatory component to why people are struggling with long hauler symptoms.
Okay. Okay, so we can control some of this inflammation and it's important to get on top of it. And I know that people with long COVID are exhausted and they're hungry and their caretakers are trying their best to feed them. But they're also craving comfort food. All I wanted was frozen toaster waffles and bacon. And I know that wasn't, fortunately now, like the lemon raspberry chia pudding is my new bacon.
Oh, God.
Thank you. But can you, are there a few meals that you can recommend that could really make a difference in a person's healing during long COVID that would be simple? I mean, I know that once they get the book, they can look through and see what appeals to them. But right off the bat, like, just what can they eat?
Well, first of all, I think we should have a slogan somewhere, maybe on a T-shirt of lemon raspberry chia pudding is the new bacon. I think that would be kind of it.
Okay, done. Done.
That made my day. So and there's nothing wrong with good grass-fed pasture-raised bacon too, but yeah, I get your point. I mean, that the conventional, traditional comfort food, we have to look at the quality of foods that we're having. And I think if shifting our perspective, like you're saying, I like the way you even said that. It's like, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with enjoying food and having foods taste delicious and be nourishing and enjoyable. Like that's wonderful. So let's find ways to do that. So that the fact that you enjoy that lemon raspberry chia pudding, like let's focus on things that are delicious, that are that are working for you, not against you, but you still enjoy. Because the reality is every food we eat either feeds inflammation or fights it, right? There's no benign food. There's no Switzerland meal. There's no, I'm doing nothing for your physiology, neutral food. It's yeah, right. It's some in incremental ways. Some you're not going to notice it impacting you one way or the other, but a lot of foods that we eat are really significant modulators of our immune system and how inflammation is expressed in the body. So we have to see each meal or each snack as an opportunity to do one or the other. And we have that choice and agency over our health in that way. And it's just like it takes time to get to where people are at with chronic health problems. It's going to take time to build when you're dealing with a chronic health issue, whether it be long COVID or anything else, any other sort of inflammatory problem. It's going to take time, but each meal it can be a step in the right direction. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but it means that you have to really be mindful. And back to that mindful eating approach, I think that's such a powerful tool to really take into account, is this thing serving you or sabotaging you? So many people eat mindlessly or eat distracted or eat because they're stressed and shamed and overwhelmed, to really sort of calm that inner chatter noise to see what you can, how you can serve yourself, and to create a stillness and a space around the meal that you're having will allow you to start to go towards things that are in alignment with how you want to feel. Because the reality is, and you know this because I talk about it in the book, but the message that I talk about with my patients and the message that I talk about in intuitive fasting in all my books is this concept of food peace. It shouldn't be about you can't have that, or you like all the things you can't have, and look at how restrictive and how miserable you are on your like quote unquote diet. It's not about that. It's about you can eat whatever the heck you want, but I want you to love feeling great more than you thought you missed something that didn't make you feel good. And it's a bad trade-off when you stop feeling great, when you eat something that's going to potentially dim your light. So like I'm teaching people in the books and to my patients, I'm teaching them what are foods that are going to enhance your light, what are going to raise how you feel, how it's going to lower inflammation levels and improve your quality of life. So this is active. This isn't restrictive. Avoiding foods that don't make you feel good isn't restrictive. It's for self-respect. And I think shifting that paradigm is the genesis of sustainable wellness.
So beautiful. Love that. So if somebody just walked up to you on the street and said, okay, so what should I eat? I've got inflammation. Just tell me one thing that's safe to eat. I know that there's this, individual diversity that we have. We need to make sure that each person is eating the specific foods for themselves. But overall, is there something that you feel safe saying, eat this, just eat this at least?
Air and ice cubes. Just kidding. Just joking.
Great.
Low lectin bark will be fine. I'm just kidding. So I would focus on more. Let's talk about the things you'd want to start minimizing first, and not to focus on the negative, because I don't see them as negative. It's like if something's going to dim your light, it's not negative. Again, it's self-respect. So I would at least consider minimizing the amount of processed sugar you're having. So that's read labels, inform yourself, educate, empower yourself on reading labels, because sugar comes in a lot of different euphemisms. Look for the suffix "-os", look for pretty sounding things. Read the grams of sugars, added sugars on the label. Just look at added sugar, total sugars, and look at that. And look how much fiber is in there too. So total carbohydrates is including fiber sometimes. So if you get a healthier food or a whole food, it's going to have some fiber and it's going to have net carbs. But I would look at added sugar and then total carbohydrates, and then look at the fiber amount. Just to educate yourself, and then the quality of the food by reading the label and what types of sugars they're adding, because they're obviously not all metabolized in the same way in the body. So decreasing the amount of sugar, decreasing the amount of grains, predominantly gluten-containing grains, because it's hybridized, it's crossbred, especially in the West. It's sprayed with lots of things too. So it's out of alignment with our biochemistry. So researchers estimate that our genes haven't changed in 10,000 years, but yet our food supply, specifically our grain supply, has changed quite dramatically in quite a finite period of time when you're putting that into context with what we've evolved with as a human race. So looking at the amount of grains, you can get better quality grains and gluten-free grains, and we use them in the book too. There's clean carb cycling days. So I'm not anti-carbohydrates, and by all means, carbohydrates aren't just grains. There's fruits are carbohydrates, sweet potatoes, starches are carbohydrates. So there's definitely non-grain carbs too. But decreasing the amount of gluten-containing grains. 3 would be industrial seed oils, decreasing the things like canola oil and vegetable oil and soybean oil, which can be pro-inflammatory. They're highly processed, refined oils. And then 4 would be conventional dairy. So you can get better versions of dairy too. We talk about the different types of grass-fed and fermented, and A2 milk and things like that can be better, but just for the sake of simplicity, decreasing that too. So that's what I call the core 4. Those are the 4 foods that are most likely to drive inflammation, disrupt the microbiome, which is where 75% of the immune system is. It's in the gastrointestinal system. And then increase healthy fats, things like avocados, wild caught fish, grass-fed beef, olive oil, avocados, polyphenol, extra virgin olive oil. So that's good, clean protein and fats. Lots of vegetables. Cooking them if you have a more sensitive gut. A lot of times people with long COVID have digestive issues. So have more soups and stews, and have things that are already sort of pre-digested for your body. Not having lots of raw vegetables, which can be tough to digest when you're healing. And then low fructose fruits, focusing on things like berries and citrus fruits and things like that. And then there's a place for clean, the gluten-free grains that are, especially if you're doing more of a cyclical approach, like I talk about in intuitive fasting, like rice and things like that. So those are foods to focus on.
Great, thank you. Woo, that's a lot. One big soup with a lot of stuff in it.
That's right. Soups are a good vehicle for lots of stuff. Yeah.
Great. So right now, they're saying that approximately 33 million people will have contracted COVID in the United States alone, and about a third of them may have long COVID issues. So we have this broad spectrum of symptoms, and we have this broad range of medical avenues that people are taking. Some people see their family doctor, and some people see their shaman. And I've been pretty far reaching as far as the types of medical professionals I've seen for support and creating the treatment plan that I did for myself. I've seen neurologists and physical therapists. I'm doing neurofeedback, but all the way to cold water therapy and taping my mouth shut at night. So I know it's important for people to know that you are not just a nutritionist, you are a functional medicine doctor. And I'd love it if you could tell our listeners a little bit about functional medicine in general, and then more specifically to this 10 to 11 million people, this broad audience. What encouraging words do you have for us, for our recovery, for potentially reversing any damage that may have been done, and how we can come back even stronger?
Sure. So I think the body is amazingly resilient. So I have the past 12 plus years, 11 hours a day, I get to see the amazing resilience capacity of the human body. And obviously COVID at the time of recording this is all new to us, to the long-term journey that some people have with these issues. But my experience overall with the human immune system and the human healing capacity, I have full hope that people, especially as we understand more and more facets of it, we'll be able to have agency over our health and do everything we can to optimize our health over time. So it's it's just something that if I had to answer your question of the differences between functional medicine and more conventional medicine, and I don't necessarily like seeing a full separation of that. I think another word for functional medicine is integrative medicine or systems medicine. So I want to not have us be either or. I want to be both and I mean, amazing institutions. The Cleveland Clinic has a functional medicine center, and all the doctors at the Cleveland Clinic's functional medicine center are trained through the Institute for Functional Medicine. And that's who's training myself and my team. So most of IFM, most of us within the functional medicine space are very integrated into that space. Many of them are conventionally trained too. I started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers in the world over 12 years ago. So I've been doing this telehealth thing for a long time. I wasn't planning on a pandemic at all, obviously, but it something that I was needed for us because we were in Pittsburgh. Many people aren't in Pittsburgh. I don't know if you know that or not, but it's not like the hub of the world. But I love my city, but there's a lot of people to help. There's a lot of people that are struggling with different autoimmune issues, which is my main patient base, are people with autoimmunity. So over the past over a decade, that's what I've been immersed in clinically to deal with. The main differences between what we do in functional medicine is we interpret labs using a thinner reference range. So anybody that's listening to this now will know, hey, when I get my lab, my number is being compared to this reference range, this X to Y interval. And if you go to another lab, you probably will see that reference range will vary slightly based off of that average, because it's based off of a statistical bell curve average of people who go to labs. People
Right.
go to labs aren't the healthiest bunch of people, sadly. So there's a lot of people that know intuitively, heck, this is not normal for me. Like these long COVID symptoms or whatever, if something not associated with COVID, these symptoms aren't normal for me. But the doctors are like, everything's fine. You're just depressed. Here's an antidepressant, or you're just getting older, or you're just stressed. You're just a new mom. All these sort of well-intentioned reasons as to how you could be having these symptoms despite these quote unquote normal labs. What they're unintentionally telling the person is you're a lot like the other people that we're comparing you to.
Right. Yeah.
And just because something's common doesn't necessarily mean it's normal. And comparing yourself to people with health problems is no way for you to find out what's going on in your health and how you can feel good. So we're looking at optimal, not average, so we can get you there. So that's what we're looking at in functional medicine. That is the functional range. Where is your body functioning the best? Where does optimal, vibrant wellness reside, which is the thinner range within that larger reference range? So we're looking at labs through that spectrum lens of like, okay, by the time someone's diagnosed with a health problem, especially like an autoimmune issue or a metabolic problem, research estimates it's about 4 to 10 years prior to that diagnosis when things were brewing on this inflammation spectrum. It didn't happen overnight. So we can see that larger continuum. That's why the book before intuitive fasting I wrote is called The Inflammation Spectrum, because it's kind of that functional medicine perspective on human physiology and human health. So we're looking at labs more succinctly, more nuanced, and then we're running more comprehensive labs. So we're looking at underlying gut problems or chronic and viral infections that are reactivated, or toxicity issues like Lyme disease, like co-infections, mycotoxin, mold toxins, and even things like stress and trauma that can perpetuate inflammation levels in the body. So it's not just about the physiological stuff, it's the past stuff that their body can be responding to even up until today. And then hormonal imbalances and nutrient deficiencies, things like that. So we realize we're all different. We're all created differently. And one person's journey to health is going to look different than the next person, even if they're diagnosed with the same thing, even if they have the same symptoms. Their journey may look different, and it probably will. So I could have 100 people with the same like brain fog or fatigue or digestive problems. And what's needed or what's most effective for one person isn't the most relevant, isn't the most effective for the next person. So don't be disheartened, because I think that we think, well, I heard this amazing story online from this one person and it didn't work for me the same way. Well, you have a different set of variables and a different set of genetics and a different set of other things to take in consideration. So understanding your context is helpful to moving past plateaus.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I can't believe it's already been almost a half an hour and I have to let you go, but I have one little final exercise that I'm going to ask you to do. In closing, I'm hoping that, so I follow you on Instagram. I've listened to your podcasts. I know you're fun. You've got a great sense of humor. So when I am feeling like I'm in a funk, I have different tricks to get out of that, and I refer to them as joy shocking. So it's a way to flood your system with positivity.
Yeah.
And this one's a great one if you really need a heavy hitter. So I'd like to ask you to laugh with me for 30 seconds. And if you have somebody else in the room or in the house that you want to come join you, that would be great. And anyone that's listening at home, I hope that I encourage you to join us. And even though it might be a little awkward at first, you, of all people, know it will activate all these wonderful chemicals and endorphins and muscles in your body. And
should I get some people for my team here to do it?
that would be great.
Like a herd of laughers?
A herd of laughers would be awesome.
Hey, are we okay? Can I go grab them?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna really do this. It'll be good. 1 second. I'll unplug this. Okay, I got as many as I could.
Okay, awesome. So I have a timer set for 30 seconds. And hello there. Hi. And I'll tell you when to start. And when I say go, we're going to laugh. You're going to bring it. You're going to giggle. You're going to dig deep, whatever you got to do. And so just kind of, roll your shoulders out and warm up your smiling muscles. And 3, 2, 1. And done. Good job, everyone.
Best podcast ever.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Oh boy, oh boy. Well, the primary goal of Positively COVID is to send a hopeful and positive message, and you definitely brought that, Dr. Cole. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I really hope that we get a chance to visit again during this long, wonderful road of recovery. And I thank you so much for contributing to my recovery, because I don't think I'd be where I am today if it weren't for your help.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. We'll hope to talk to you again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.